Well, a little bit of good news from our UCP government today. I don't think anybody could argue with the need to invest in public education spaces. And let's give them some credit. This is a generational investment in building schools. That's a good thing. But why now? Why in September when we've lost a construction season? Why not in the budget so that people could plan? Because this is typical of this government. They careen like a pinball from crisis to crisis. They wait until the leak is flooding the basement to try and close the leak, and they stick their hand in it, not looking at where the water is going. So here's what they've done today. By announcing this all at once, they've massively increased the inflation and the cost of construction for every single one of those schools. They've sucked up the entire construction workforce, which is also needed to build houses, to build all the other things that we need for growing communities. And let's be clear, the Premier can act surprised as much as she wants. We all knew this was happening. Teachers knew, parents knew, students knew, anyone who was paying attention knew that this is what was happening in our schools, and it was happening every single day. The Calgary Board of Education said last year they needed 22 new schools. They got funding for the next 5 years for one. So we all knew this was going to happen. And we could have been methodical. We could have been thoughtful. We could have built schools as they were needed until waiting for an emergency. But this is typical of this government. And by the way, normal governments have consultations. Normal governments talk to people. Normal governments do not use taxpayer money to go out across the airwaves on a random Tuesday night and announce $8.6 billion in spending out of the clear blue sky. This is not how government should work. And one other thing, I'd like to highlight that as far as I know, this is the first time in Canadian history that public taxpayer money is going to build private schools. Whether or not you believe in private schools or not, let's be clear on what that means. It means that the schools will not be built in the neighborhoods where they're needed, in the brand new neighborhoods where young families are moving. It means we give up on economies of scale. And it means that those schools don't necessarily serve every student in the community. Building at those schools, using that money to build public schools is more efficient, it's smarter, it's faster, and it will serve students better. So with that, thanks for the money. Thanks for giving us back some of our own money in what we really need. But ultimately, let's stop governing by crisis. Questions?
Obviously, $8.3 billion in capital funding. We have school board hospital is asking for operational funding.
Here's the thing, we still have educational assistants in this province who haven't been given a raise in over a decade. We still have a huge shortage of teachers, and we have teachers leaving the profession every day because of how badly they're being treated by this government. So it's very typical of Premier Smith to announce the capital funding, but have no idea how we're going to staff those places. Give you another example. The new cancer center is finally taking appointments in October. It should increase the capacity of our cancer treatment by 7 to 10 times, and the increase to their funding has been so small it will barely increase capacity at all, despite having that beautiful new building. And that's precisely the problem we will run into with these schools unless the Premier comes to the table with funding for teachers, for education assistants, and for custodians.
Well, going back to the envelope calculations here, we're looking at probably the largest expenditure on private and charter schools in the history of the province here. What happens to that expenditure when it implementing detail?
You know, Rachel Notley's experience has shown that we are really good about choice in the system as long as it's public, as long as every single kid has access. And however, these investments in private school capital, which I believe we've never seen in Canada before, are basically saying we're totally willing to take all the taxpayers' money and put it into places that very few students can access. And I think that's wrong. Others? Anything on the big decision that the city council just made, or did I cover that off earlier? Look, this is unbelievably sad. I am crushed, not for myself, not for city council, but for the hundreds of thousands of Calgarians the activists, the citizens, the mums and dads, the students who have been advocating for better public transit for their neighborhoods in Southeast and North Central Calgary for decades. And now they're not going to get it. What the province proved today is they're not only bad at governance, they're bad at politics. They thought, as the junior funding partner in this program, that they could just simply get everyone else to agree with them. Here's what's going to happen. Will they be able to give you a line that goes from the hospital in Seaton to the new arena for under $7 billion? Sure, they will. That was always on the table. The city was always planning on building the line out to Seaton. We have the right of way, we've purchased much of the land. It's good to go. But here's the problem, that line doesn't go where people need to go. So if you're not going to the 10-day stampede or a concert or a hockey game, you're going to be dropped off 2 to 3 kilometers away from where you work. Who's going to do that? Who's going to take that train? Who's going to walk or go to City Hall to get on an incredibly packed red or blue line train just to get to work? It's not going to work. And that's why the city had worked with our funding partners at the province and the federal government to say, look, this sucks that it's so expensive, but we've pulled together the largest funding for any project in Calgary's history, from the federal government, from the municipality, and from the province. And what we're going to do is we're going to build the hard, complicated part first, because we'll never have the money to build the hard, complicated part again. And then once that's done, we will extend it. We will continue to build towards the hospital in Seaton, towards Country Hill Boulevard, and beyond Stony Trail in the north. That was always the plan. But now you will never be able to assemble that kind of money to build the hard part downtown again. Means the north is cut off, means we'll never be able to serve them, means the southeast line won't actually get people to their offices. And this is a very, very significant problem. The other thing that I'll add is, let's remember that this is a government that perpetually is complaining that the federal government takes money out of Alberta and doesn't invest it back. The largest investment the federal government has ever made in a project in Alberta, and they lit it on fire and left it on the table to go be spent in Saskatchewan or Manitoba or Ontario or Quebec. This is not what a normal government does. It is indeed lunacy. In my time as mayor, we had been working with the provincial government arm in arm, even when we disagreed. Every step of the way, they said, why are you doing it like this? Why are you doing it like that? But in the end, and I assume the same thing has happened with Mayor Gondek and her council. And 40 or so days ago, the minister went on the radio and said, we agree with this. We don't like it, but we agree with it. The money is solid. You can bank on it. And 34 days later, without having a single meeting, well, a lot of people were on summer vacation, he sent a letter out of the clear blue sky to the city saying, nah, changed our minds. And what this does is this takes away everyone's confidence in the Alberta business environment. Construction companies have said straight out to me, we will never bid on work in Alberta again. And when I said, come on, of course you're going to bid on work in Alberta again, they said, well, we probably will, but we're going to charge a risk premium. And I said, a political risk premium that you charge in a war-torn country or a country with an entirely unstable government? And they said the very same. So can you imagine that the Alberta Advantage has turned into one of the riskiest places for people to invest, which is going to massively increase costs on every project going forward, including all those new schools. I've gotten beyond trying to figure out if this government is motivated by malice or incompetence. Probably a bit of both. I think they thought that they'd be able to throw off a good insult against me, that they thought that the city and the feds would immediately cave and give them money for whatever they wanted. But here's the thing, it doesn't work. So I will thank them for one thing. Soon in the Alberta NDP store, you will be able to buy Nenshi Nightmare merchandise just in time for Halloween. So thanks to them for helping me raise a lot of money.
Labor question. Obviously, ATA 31, the primary teacher deal expired on August 31st.
Mm-hmm.
So the province proactively stepped in. In Northern Alberta to prevent any kind of strike in those situations with those teachers now. Any reaction to those?
It's not teachers in Northern Alberta, it's educational assistants and support staff. I just want to be very clear on this because it's actually quite important. The government put their thumb on the scale in those negotiations in Northern Alberta. And basically, they prevented the employer and the union from actually coming up with a deal. And now they've stepped in and taken away their charter fundamental right to a work stoppage. This is not how you treat workers. This is not how you treat school boards. Again, they're careening from crisis to crisis of their own making. And it should never have had to come to this. We should have been in a situation where there was adequate funding to pay people decently because we have a shortage of these workers. We need them desperately in our schools, and we got to be able to pay them decently so that they'll take those jobs and want to come to work every day.
Or any concern that kind of dealing with educational health?
Oh, I am certain that this province is going to do everything they can. The premier telegraphs this consistently. She doesn't believe in the value of collective bargaining, that she will close down collective bargaining at the first opportunity. She's called for the federal government to do it on multiple occasions. So I have no doubt that the province will do everything in their power to prevent workers from getting a fair deal in this province. Okay? Thank you, everybody.